Hey guys, what's going on? Went to go see Spectre last night, and oh man, is this another movie where I had to manage the living crap out of my expectations. Now, I've made no secret that I'm a Bond nut. I'm the Bond guy around here, so much so that I didn't invite any other CineFix people to the screening. I invited a buddy of mine who shares my enthusiasm with Bond because I didn't want any of these jokers around here like sullying my experience with it. That's how much respect I have for this franchise. So watching this movie, I wanted to love every second of it. I really did. You know, it's Spectre is back and everybody's kind of assuming that Christoph Waltz is going to be Blofeld again, and that's going to be awesome. It's going to be really great. And long story short, it's not that great. It's fine. The movie is utterly fine. The action is pretty okay. Christoph Waltz is a great villain. Dave Bautista has a great energy. He's like a perfect Bond henchman. But the movie itself, Spectre follows Bond, and this is not spoilery stuff. This is more or less straight out of the official synopsis. But Spectre follows Bond as he goes on a case based on a clue from his past. Meanwhile, MI6 is on notice about being this antiquated and useless branch of the government, and then Bond has to go rogue to solve everything on his own. Again, this is exactly the same thing that he had to do in Quantum of Solace and in Skyfall. And that's where the movie starts to lose me a little bit. In the middle of the movie, just the movie itself kind of drags and it meanders a little bit as he goes and does, you know, he follows one clue to the next. But the real problem is that thematically and character-wise, for a franchise that rebooted it and made it character-based, they really went out of their way to not advance the character anymore with this movie. Thematically, character-wise, it did the exact same thing that Skyfall did. But Skyfall had this great reverence for the Bond franchise. You could tell that Sam Mendes and Daniel Craig were having a blast doing James Bond movies. The way they used the score and the way they used the cars and the one-liners, the way they were all delivered was like, guys, isn't it cool that we're doing a Bond movie? This is great. Like, it towed a really perfect line. In Spectre, though, they had tons and tons of classic Bond iconography. It was all over the place, but this time it had this energy of like, Bond, am I right? Like, they were all just a little bit over it. The cold open takes place in Mexico City on the Day of the Dead. It's very legitimately very cool sequence. It opens with this one really long shot, like swooping in and out of buildings and everything. Very cool stuff. Visually feels a lot like Live and Let Die. There's this rad fight scene on a train that looks, it's kind of like From Russia with Love. There's some snowy action that actually reminded me of that skiing down the hill in a cello case sequence from The Living Daylights. Even Daniel Craig's performance as Bond is even more sort of Brosnan and more than he has been in the past. So the movie takes great pains to sort of reference every era of Bond. And the references to his own time as Bond are really heavy too. Like, if you haven't seen Casino Royale and Skyfall, you don't really get what's going on in this movie. And I might as well throw a little spoiler warning in here because I have to kind of talk about the ending in as vague a way as I possibly can. I'm not going to give away anything specific, but I do have to at least sort of allude to an ending of this movie to talk about what I think is the strangest part about it. Okay, all good? Moving on. I do think, though, if you've come to the franchise with Daniel Craig, this is probably a very satisfying movie for you because it wraps up his run as Bond in a really interesting way. The story that started with Daniel Craig getting Bond's 00 status at the beginning of Casino Royale is finished now at the end of Spectre. So if Craig's your Bond and that's all you know of Bond, this is probably a very satisfying movie. This movie wraps up Daniel Craig's run as James Bond so thoroughly that me and my buddy actually, we started to leave, but then we stopped and we're like, wait a minute, this might be the last Bond movie they ever make. So we stopped and we stood and watched the credits to make sure that James Bond Will Return title card comes up at the end, and it did. It did, and obviously they're gonna make more James Bond movies. The way that they wrapped up this movie felt like, you know what? Maybe this is the last James Bond movie. And then seeing how the movie ended, he had the last 10 minutes of this movie, he has all these choices where if he goes this way, he's Bond, and if he goes this way, he's like retired or something. And he kept going this way. It was very confusing. And the way that the movie ended, looking back at the rest of it, at all that pastiche, at all those references to the early Bond movies, it felt like a farewell tour in a way. It's like a band gets together one last time, we'll play all the hits, it'll be great, and then we'll go right off into the sunset. And I mean, I won't be shocked because these things are making so much money and they're going to throw all this money at Sam Mendes and Daniel Craig to come back. And historically, Eon Productions, Barbara Broccoli, Michael G. Wilson, they want the same crew to keep coming back. So they're going to do what they can to keep Mendes and Craig, I bet. But I will be surprised if Daniel Craig comes back for another run at Bond after the way this one ended. Especially with all the talk here lately about how he'd rather slash his wrists than come back and do another Bond. And then plus the distribution rights for the whole franchise are up in the air right now. There's going to be a bidding war for those, I'm sure. So they're not even sure where their home is going to be for the next movie yet. So in a way, it makes sense that they would tie a bow around the franchise for the moment. But I bet it's going to be at least 6 or 7 years before we see Bond again, and I bet it's going to be a different Bond. That's what I'm rooting for. I want them to go back to the formula. I've enjoyed Daniel Craig's run as Bond. I've enjoyed the fact that they're sequels, that this is a little sort of pocket universe of Bond, but I want them to get back to the Bond formula. I want the cold open to have nothing to do with the rest of the movie. Then after the title sequence, he shows up at M's office. M says, go investigate this crazy billionaire who's up to something strange. Then with MI6's complete blessing, he goes out and investigates, takes down a bad guy, saves the world. The end. Bang the chick, roll credits. That's what I want out of my James Bond from now on. That's what I wanted at the end of Skyfall, and it felt like they were primed to do it at the end of Skyfall, but Spectre just rehashed all the stuff that Skyfall did, so now I'm really ready for them to get back to that formula. And as much as I've loved Daniel Craig as Bond, it's time to get a new Bond in there. It's time to start doing something new. Because I think you can look at Spectre one of two ways. One, it's this fun sort of Bond's greatest hits kind of outing. Or two, it's a sign that they were actually out of ideas for Daniel Craig's Bond back in Skyfall, and they just squeezed another one out. So let me know what you think about Spectre down in the comments below if you've seen it already. If not, go check it out this weekend. Come back and let me know what you thought about it. And you might as well, while you're down in the comments, tell me what your favorite Bond movie of all time is. No, favorite Bond moment of all time. Let me know down in the comments below. Click like and subscribe and stick around CineFix for more movie content and probably more me talking about James Bond. It's going to be a long time, Luke. It's going to be a while.
I think I agree.
I mean, I want you to go see it so that I can talk like soups specifically about it.